Good evening and welcome to the Plaistow Board of Selectmen meeting for April 26th, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Beth, may I have a roll call, please?
Select Chair, Mr. Talion.
Here.
Select Vice Chair, Mr. Blinn.
Here.
Selectman Mr. DeRoche.
Here.
Selectman Mr. Coy.
Here.
Selectman Mr. Britton.
Here.
And note for the record, we have Town Manager Mr. Pearson joining us remotely, as well as Assistant Town Manager and our Finance Director, Mr. Colby.
Okay, thank you. So just to begin with, Jay, would you please let us know the reason why you're doing this remotely and whether or not you are alone?
I am out of town and I am alone.
Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, would you all please stand, and Selectman Blinn, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John. The Board of Selectmen, in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, is authorized to meet electronically. The Board of Selectmen is utilizing the Zoom program for electronic meetings. During these meetings, all members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during the meeting, and the public has access to contemporarily listen to the meeting. The link to these electronic meetings is provided on the town website. The public may call in for comment during the public comments portion of the agenda at 603-382-5200, extension 209. They may also watch the meeting on cable TV channel 17 or live stream the meeting at livestream.com/Plaistow/meetings. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question by email, please email Beth at bhossack, and I'll spell that, BHOSSACK, @plaistow.com. Questions and comments received by 3 p.m. the day of the Board of Selectmen meeting will be read at that meeting. Our first meeting is to approve the minutes of the April 12th meeting. May I have a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Do I have a second? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye. You have to do
Hold on.
Yeah, we have to-
Go ahead. Do it. Would you please do a roll call? Thank you.
Mr. Talion.
Yes.
Mr. Blinn.
Yes.
Mr. DeRoche.
Jay?
Was on mute, yes.
Mr. Coy.
Yes.
Mr. Britton.
Yes.
Okay, so that the minutes pass 5-0-0. Okay. So public comment is limited to items on the agenda for this meeting. If you wish to provide comments to other topics, please contact myself or Beth Hossack, and we will schedule you time in a future BOS meeting. Is there anybody here to speak in public comment on any of the agenda items? Yes, could you come forward and mention your name and where you live and which agenda item you wish to discuss?
Excuse me. My name's Robert Hobbs, known as Bob. I live at 328 Giles Street in Haverhill, so therefore I'm not a resident of Plaistow. I'm here as the president of the Plaistow Historical Society. And the reasons for my coming is I believe this evening you are going to be voting on vendor fees that the Old Home Day Committee, or the town, collects, and how they will be dispersed, my understanding. Back in 2017, the same type of an issue came up, and there were two meetings in December where the Board of Selectmen came to a resolution on this. None of you members were a part of that group, so you're all new. The only one that may have some familiarity is Mr. Blinn, as Tammy Bergeron, a close friend, was a select person at that time. What was determined is that since the inception of Old Home Day, the vendor fees, the charge the vendors paid for having a table to set up on the green, those fees would go to the Plaistow Historical Society as their operating budget. Initially, that was all a handshake, verbal, and it went on from 1974-75 when Old Home Day restarted up until 2017 when they were suggesting that those funds no longer come to the Historical Society. It was determined that the funds would continue to come to the Historical Society, but in a manner a little bit different than what we had been accustomed to. And I can say that we because I have been involved with the Historical since 2004. So anybody that's a current member of the Historical Society that is active does not have the background that I have, nor do any of you folks here this evening, unfortunately. So what I wanted to do is just refer you guys back to December of 2017, and it was determined that the finding or summary of the meeting was the vendors' fees. I'm sorry, I can't read with my glasses theming up.
Feel your
So-
pain.
Can I remove this?
We all
or
do.
Am I not far enough away?
Lower it down, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the vendors participating in Old Home Day, the fees would go to the town first, then the town would send the monies to the Historical Society. And that passed on a 5-0-0 vote, that is what they were going to do. There was a subsequent part to that the finance director worked with the chairman of the Old Home Day and the Historical Society to establish proper financial control of town funds. And that too passed at a 5-0-0 vote. So my question is, if it has been determined that if you do have an Old Home Day with vendor tables, those fees would go to the Historical Society as it was agreed, why are we having a vote or a disagreement with those funds? I don't know if you can answer that now or not.
So your time is up, and I do appreciate your input. Let me just correct you on a couple of items, and I don't want to have a dialogue with you, but more than happy to discuss this with you separately. We are not voting on vendor fees. Okay. We were asked to look at the bylaws, that there was supposedly going to be a change to the bylaws, and we need to approve any change in a committee's bylaws. That was the purpose. When I looked at the current set of bylaws, there was nothing in the bylaws about who does the vendor fees. So I basically, as far as I can understand, it is to the decision of a majority of the committee to decide how they want to process that. But we are not involved in that at all. Secondly, vendor fees will not be able to be used to pay for expenses for this year for Old Home Day. Okay, and that was communicated to the chairperson. Okay? So if you want to get into a further discussion, I'd be more than happy to engage with you at a later time.
Okay, that was my understanding from what I saw on the Old Home Day Committee Zoom broadcast that was going on. So that's why I was here, and I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate you being here. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other person present for public comment? Okay, seeing none, We'll proceed to our first item of business, which is a proclamation making May Building Safety Month. We have as our guest Mr. Peter Blanchette, our Code Enforcement Officer. Peter, please welcome. Would you please introduce yourself?
Good evening, members. My name is Peter Blanchette. I come from Lawrence, Mass., but I serve as the building official here in the town of Plaistow. Mr. Chair, I thank you for the opportunity to come before the board. And also through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to address the board, if I may.
Absolutely.
Members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present this proposal on behalf of the Building Safety Department. Building Safety Month is an international campaign that takes place in May in order to raise awareness about building safety. The campaign publicizes and reinforces the need for building and fire codes, proper permitting, and a diligent inspection program. This is one of the key things that my department intends on focusing on in educating the citizens of the community on the importance of getting a permit, having it done right, having it properly inspected. It's not only for the safety of the folks. Sometimes people skip permits. They think it's a little bit of a trouble to them. But in the long run, if they ever go sell the house, everything is properly done, properly inspected, and properly permitted. And through this proposal and through this month, we're trying to do a sort of an educational month to educate the community on not only these important things, but what our department is about. So all communities need building codes, including Plaistow, to protect their citizens from disasters such as fires, weather-related events, and structural collapse. Building codes are our town's best way of protecting homes, schools, offices, businesses, and entertainment venues. Building code inspectors and fire code inspectors work day in and day out to keep the public safe. Another part of our education program for this month, which will be included in this month, we are partnering with the fire department also, and to get the idea that out there that the inspectors are doing their jobs. Oftentimes in other towns that I have worked in also, inspectors are somewhat frowned upon. Nobody wants to see them. They think we're out just causing trouble. We want to let them know that we're professionals in what we do. We're certified in what we do. And we're there to serve the public, the general public. Building Safety Month will provide the town with an exciting venue to both educate and inform our residents about the importance of obtaining permits for their home projects and the benefits of having proper inspections. I respectfully ask for your strong support of this department's initiatives and your endorsement of the document that I presented before you this evening. In that document, for the record, Mr. Chair, is the proclamation that I think you all have a copy of, and it just cites that the town will support our initiative to go on with this program. We're joining a international program that declares that the month of May Building Safety Month. We want to be part of that program. We want the town to be part of that program. And I respectfully ask for your support for the building safety departments and the fire department's initiatives to go forward with this. We have a couple of events planned. We're hoping to do an open house at our new facility over there on Elm Street. We'll have some tables set up, do some explaining. We'll have some contractors on hand. Some of the local businesses have donated some items. Kind of, make it a family thing. We'll do some explaining. I'll be there at a table. If people want to, on a Saturday, come down and look at how to get a permit and stuff, this might be a good time to do it. The springtime, as we know, everyone's thinking about the home repairs, the new windows, the new roof, the decks, the swimming pools. Those are all key things that we need to be sure that are done properly. And we're trying to make it a little bit easier, show the office off a little bit, and show that we're here to assist the general public. So with that being said, I think you all have a packet in front of you. Mr. Chair, I would only ask maybe for the record, if it's not too long, if you feel like reading it, and if the board would agree, we could,
So currently, we have 4 signatures from the Board of Selectmen, and the 5th signature is currently in Myrtle Beach. So as soon as he gets back, we'll make sure that he gets the opportunity to sign it as well. So this is a proclamation, Building Safety Month, May 2021, whereas the town of Plaistow is committed to recognizing that our growth and strength depends on the life, safety, and economic value of the homes, buildings, and infrastructure that serve our citizens, both in everyday life and in times of disaster. And whereas our confidence in the resilience of these buildings that make up our community is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, tradespeople, design professionals, laborers, plumbers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe constructions of buildings. And whereas these guardians are dedicated members of the International Code Council, a nonprofit that brings together local, state, and federal officials that are experts in the built environment to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect us in the buildings where we live, learn, work, play. And whereas safer buildings, safer communities, safer world, the theme of the Building Safety Month 2021, encourages all Americans to raise the awareness about the importance of safe and resilient construction, fire prevention, disaster mitigation, energy conservation, water safety, training the next generation, and new technologies in the construction industry. Whereas each year in observation of Building Safety Month, people all over the world are asked to consider the commitments to improve building safety, reliance, and economic investment at home and in the community, and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by local and state building departments, fire prevention bureaus, and federal agencies in protecting lives and property. Now, therefore, we do hereby proclaim May 2021 as Building Safety Month in the town of Plaistow, New Hampshire. We urge all people to participate in the Building Safety Month activities and to commence efforts to improve building safety. Witness these signatures and the seal of the town of Plaistow, New Hampshire, this 26th day of April in the year 2021. Peter, we are very, very happy to support this initiative, and if there's anything that the Board of Selectmen can do to assist or help, please let us know.
I certainly will, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming in, Peter.
Nice to meet you.
Our next agenda item is the Trash and Recycling Advisory Committee, which we call TRAC, and their recommendations. Ms. Isabel Gaudreau is the chair of the TRAC committee, and Mr. Bob Kincaid is the vice chair. We welcome both Isabel electronically as well as Bob, and we thank you for both of your input and recommendations. We'd ask that you would come forward, and I think we have the slides present so you can follow along on them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How's my audio?
Good.
We good? Okay. So I guess I'll just dive right in. I believe I'm going to be presenting, just have a brief slide deck here to give us some background and introduction, and then our preliminary recommendations for your discussion. Isabel is also on the phone, so between us, if there's questions or discussion, we'd be happy to engage in that. So just briefly, by way of background and introduction, the current trash and recycling contract, which is currently through JRM, is set to expire on December 31st, 2021. A little bit of background on that. It was previously June 30th. It was extended, so we do have more time, but there's definitely some action and deliverables that need to come before then. The need for a new contract would be effective January 1st, 2022. Will require an RFP. After that RFP, there would then presumably be vendor selection, potentially additional cart purchases, all the cart distribution information to the residents, rollout, implementation. So, like I said, definitely some more action items to come on that. The Trash and Recycling Committee was formed to evaluate the current market landscape and to make recommendations to the board. One of the main things we did over the last 2 months since we were formed was we researched the current environment and landscape for recycling and trash municipal collection in general. And we also specifically researched neighboring towns to understand what they're doing. One of the constraints, just to mention before we dive into this specific recommendation, was that Plaistow has already purchased one 96-gallon bin per household. And those bins are intended for automated collection. That quantity is sufficient to serve the current need for either trash or recycling, but not both. That, as we understand it, that open PO includes direct-to-household distribution of those carts for later this year. So before I dive into the recommendations, any questions, feedback, concerns with that? All right. I think if we could move on to the next page, or is that me? Where are we here? So this is a little bit of the detail in the background. I didn't expect to go into this, but if there's interest, we can look a little bit into the detail on the surrounding towns. Guess I'm gonna move forward unless there's interest in diving deeper on this. So what our recommendation broke this into the model and the method, and then we've got the scope and the detail in future slides. So the model that we're recommending is a curbside pickup of both trash and recycling townwide, which matches our current model. And then also that this would be a model where the town would contract with the provider to provide the service to all household residents. In other words, no direct bill to the residents. The method, and here's where there is something slightly different from our current method, which is that we're proposing to add carts, which were not previously in the model before. In our current contract, folks have their own trash bins, their own recycling bins that they've purchased from wherever, and those are picked up, by a human, put into the truck. This new model basically calls for an automated cart system. A number of reasons for that. Partially, it was already a previous decision from the previous board, but also a number of benefits to that are it's just a much more cleaner system. It's more efficient. It's the way that the industry is going. So that's why we felt that we should move to that cart model, both for the trash and recycling. Method would include purchase carts, not leased. So as our understanding is, the carts that are on open PO, the intent would be that the town would be purchasing those, again, both for trash and recycling. And just again, to reiterate that, provider charges the town for pickup and disposal of both trash and recycling. So that's the model and the method. The scope would be to include both trash and recycling in a single RFP from a single provider for efficiency and economy. It would also be recycling biweekly and trash weekly, which is the same cadence we have right now. And then lastly, the bulk and the bulk pickup, which is currently something that we do have as an offering. Essentially, you could put out a couch or a mattress, as I understand it, and that can go into the truck now. That wouldn't be possible with a cart system. We also the town organizes hazardous waste, had a very successful hazardous waste pickup just this past weekend. Both of those were out of scope for our research. So the idea would be those could be bid at the provider's discretion as separate lines on the proposal. Lastly, detail is that we would use 96 gallons for all households by default for recycling. The first bin for every household would be free. And then this is something that I would imagine you might want to discuss. We wanted to recommend a resident choice, either a 64 or a 96 gallon for trash. What we found with neighboring towns was some were doing 64, some were doing 96, and some were giving resident choice. Some folks may find that the 64 is too small. Other folks might find that the 96 is too heavy and unwieldy, which is why we felt that the best solution specifically for trash would be to allow for customer choice of either a 64 or a 96 gallon bin for trash. And if we were to do that, we would use the existing open PO for bins to use for the recycling bins. Additional bins would be optional for purchase, and the way we would manage this is we would create, design, and implement a mailer sent out to allow for customer choice to determine what they want to do for their trash. They would also be allowed to purchase additional trash or recycling bins at their cost. Anyone who doesn't send back in their flyer would be defaulted to a 64 gallon for trash. I think that's basically it. So that's our recommendation, keeping in mind the timing, knowing that this model would require an additional purchase of bins. Wanted to get this in front of you so that you could discuss and make a determination and potentially move forward with both the RFQs and then potentially ultimately the additional bins.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bob. Are there any selectmen that have a question to ask of Bob or Isabel? There being none, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One, have you considered eliminating plastic as a recyclable? There is only type 1 and type 2 of plastics are recyclable, but they cause the most contamination because they are normally combined with other types of plastic. For example, the rings around drinking bottles and the caps on drinking bottles are not recyclable plastics. So have you considered eliminating plastic and going with only paper, glass, and metal?
The committee hadn't specifically looked into that. If I could speak for myself, I think, personally, I think that's a good idea, at least to look into. I think the committee would be happy to do additional research and bring back information on that. So definitely concur that by and large, numbers 3 and above on plastic are frequently not getting recycled, or they're getting sent overseas, and it's just not an efficient model, whereas number 1 and number 2, by and large, there is a market for those if they can separate them out. So to your point, that might be something worth looking into, but I guess my question to you would be, should we look into that in general or wait until we have a model or, a supplier selected and then look into that specific, once we have a supplier, it would be the model as we discussed, and we could discuss more in detail with them and
I
say,
think that makes most sense.
Oh, I agree, Darrell. We got to get the supplier first, right?
Yeah.
And then we can figure out what can be
Absolutely.
recycled and not after that for the number 1, 2, or whatever.
And if I can add, we had talked a bunch about education and avoiding contamination and making clear to people that not everything that has a recycling symbol can be recycled. So education will definitely be a big piece of our work going forward.
Very good.
Thank you, Isabel. The last question, the last couple of questions I have is the cost of additional bins. There's first a cost for the actual bin, and then the contract is typically for them to pick up so many bins or containers. And so if we are to provide as many bins as people want to purchase, we will change the cost of the contract. Did you realize that, or were you aware of that?
I had, we weren't at the point of having direct conversations with suppliers, but I did have one conversation kind of off the cuff with one potential supplier. My understanding was if there were additional bins that they wouldn't charge more, but I don't have that in writing. That was just a telephone conversation. It seems like that would require additional research, at least from my perspective.
Okay.
We had a lot of concern about changing for the residents that they currently don't really have a limit for how much trash they can put out, to having a limit and having to get used to that new system. That's going to be quite a big change for some people.
Yeah. So the research that we did do is that a 96-gallon barrel is equivalent to 40-gallon barrels. It's actually a little bit bigger. Those are the size of barrels that are currently being used for trash. So a 96-gallon for trash and for recyclable should be sufficient. And so most of the companies that we contracted with for the initial RFP basically had a fixed number for the residents of the town plus some small surplus. I just wanted to make you aware that we can't have just a free-for-all that anybody wants to have 10 barrels, they can have 10 barrels and they'll get picked up. So that's just one concern that we currently have.
Yep.
Okay?
Hey, Greg.
Yes. Jay, go ahead.
As part of in the track meetings that we've had, and I did want to just take a minute and thank all the members of that committee because they've done a lot of hard work on this and spent a lot of time doing a lot of research and talking to outside vendors in other towns. So I want to thank them for all their work. Going back to the 96-gallon, one of the discussions we had was if we have a 96-gallon bucket full of trash as opposed to a 96-gallon bucket full of recycling, it's much easier to handle. So we need to consider this when we're thinking about the size of the barrel for trash, because a 96-gallon barrel for a senior citizen might be a little difficult for them to move around. Some of the 96-gallon buckets weigh upwards of 35 pounds on their own without any trash in them. So it's just something that we need to consider going forward. So I just want to throw that in there.
Thank you, Jay. Could I ask Mark Pearson, our town manager, do you believe that you have everything that you need to start an RFP process, or is there any additional questions that you'd like to pose to either Bob or Isabel?
Well, that's a little bit of a loaded question. The process here that I want to thank the track committee for getting back to the board this quick allows this information to be discussed by the Board of Selectmen, and for the Board of Selectmen to then give me the specifics to move forward to draft the RFP. So the question really is, through what track has given you and what you decide to give to me will be what will go into the RFP. I think that the previous language in the contract that hasn't changed on the expectations for the town would remain the same in the RFP with the additional changes discussed tonight and decided, by the board ultimately. So we're not ready to just draft it up now based on these recommendations. We really need the board to decide specifically on the second set of barrels, if that's the direction that the board wants to do. Is the 96-gallon barrel going to be for recycling, and then the 64 for trash? That needs to be discussed. And one of the things I did talk to the assistant town manager, finance director today about in anticipation of this conversation was that we could write up an RFP that suggests that the people that submit proposals to us do a base proposal for a base set of services, and then do the alternate bid or the alternate proposals for the other things that the board and the track committee might want to see, so that the board has the costs broken out in a proposal so that the board ultimately can decide on which vendor and which scope of services that the board, and the town can afford to move forward with. So does that answer your question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I appreciate it. I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if we had missed anything, to be able to offer that question. So we will, thank you very much, both Isabel and Bob, for the information that you have provided us and your recommendations. We have scheduled 17th of May to be a public hearing, as well as a deliberation by the Board of Selectmen to discuss and come up with a decision on what we believe should be in the RFP.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one final comment?
Absolutely.
So I was contacted today by a representative from JRM on two things. One of them is that the JRM wanted to propose to the town that some date in June or July, at the town's choosing, that JRM wants to bring up a paper shredder, because it's their opinion that because people are working from home, that there may be some documents that they're concerned about security. Therefore, JRM was going to offer free of charge to work with the town. And I suggested also the track committee, and told JRM to contact the track committee so that there could be a public, relations campaign to notify people to participate in this paper shredding, recycling program. That's number one. Number two was that JRM wanted to talk to the track committee about some of the things that they're discussing, and I did suggest that they contact the track committee, through their contacts and so forth, and they wanted to really come in and work with the track committee that is currently, meeting, to talk about some additional public relations outreach about recycling. So I thought that was encouraging for this next couple months and into the summer, where JRM is offering to do two things, obviously free of charge. And I thought that the track committee would be encouraged to hear that type of a proposal by our current vendor, and maybe going forward, we could always encourage whoever the vendor is to be to do the same thing annually.
Thank you, Mark. Is there any last questions you have from either both Bob or for Isabel? Okay. So
I just have one more
Go ahead,
comment.
Isabel.
Yes, we wanted to mention that we have spoken to the NRA as well, and that's the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. You can become a member there. The fees are about $500 a year, and we've heard that it might not be possible to put that in the budget this year, but they have information regarding the RFP process, and they have some information that we might be able to use for the RFP and the negotiating process. And they also have vendors that may be able to take some of the recycling for monetary gain, and it wouldn't be a cost factor. So those are things to maybe think about. They have offered to come in and speak to us to present exactly what resources they have and what services they provide. I don't know if they could also come to the BOS meeting at some point, or maybe somebody from the BOS could come to the track meeting when we have that guest speaker.
So, Isabel, thank you for that. I would recommend, if it's at all possible, that possibly at that meeting you come to the Great Hall and have the meeting here and have it recorded, and then it could be played to the residents as well, because I'm sure that the guidance they're going to provide you would be useful for our residents to be aware of as well.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay? All right. Thank you so much. Yes, Bob?
So just to confirm, so it's okay for us, no objections to us reaching out to JRM to schedule both the shedding day, is that on us to do, and to discuss the additional PR and all those things. Obviously, in the context of, they're aware that we're putting out an RFP, so there's no promises, but as long as that's understood,
Yep.
we're free to talk to them. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for your effort.
Bob.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
So just to the selectmen, in your selectmen's handbook, we have our schedule. Would you make sure that you please mark the 17th as a new meeting? And that will be focused on simply trash or track. And we will hopefully have both the opportunity to get additional input from the public. And then the second half will be an opportunity for us to be able to openly discuss what we believe needs to be in the RFP and hopefully come to a consensus or a conclusion to move that forward. Okay? Is that all right? All right, excellent. Our next agenda item is a cemetery discussion. We have with us Mr. Mark Guilford, our town sexton. Within the town code, the following cemetery rule applies to all. Only one central upright monument may be placed upon the lot, and all monuments must have a foundation. We currently have outstanding issues with lot owners placing granite benches on lots with gravestones already installed or being placed between rows of gravestone, making perpetual care very difficult. The people cutting the grass can't get through these. They can't manually move them because they are made of probably granite, I'm guessing.
Granite.
And our sexton has written a very sensitive and tactful draft letter that would go out to the lot owners with these benches. He is here for the BOS to provide approval of this letter to send out, and in addition to that, to enforce the current cemetery rules. So, Mark, before I ask the selectmen for their input, could you please give us any additional input that you would like to give us?
Yeah, the benches don't just hinder the maintenance guys, but the contractor has to dig the graves, okay? And it's not his job to move those. On a rare occasion, he's had to move monuments, but those things are a little more delicate than a monument, and again, it's just time he would have to spend that he doesn't always have. And to have a monument company come in and move it wasn't very timely. Sometimes he calls me up and, he's got to dig the grave the next day. Monument companies don't always have the time, and who's going to pay for the monument company to move it? It also hinders the monument company when they're coming in to deliver new monuments. They usually park the truck at the end of a row, put the monument, on a dolly, and they bring it down the road and put it in a row. And now you got a bench in the way. So it hinders a lot of people, a lot of things that go on there.
Mark, do you have an exact number of how many benches are
I think there's
illegally?
about 7. There's a couple of them that can be moved by hand, but there's a few of them that are heavy granite, yeah.
Okay. Gentlemen, any questions?
Were the benches allowed
Bill?
before? Or they
Benches,
just
as
have
far
to
as
show
I
up?
know, you go through that entire cemetery, and the only places you'll see those benches right now are in C and B. You don't see them anywhere else because they were never allowed. It's something that happened recently.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but it just did. And I just like to stop that.
So are we proposing that this letter goes out?
Please put your hand up. so
Oh,
I
I'm
can-
sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Darrell.
Did you see it?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Are we proposing this letter goes out to everyone that has a lot in the cemetery?
Yeah, I think it's about 7 benches that need to be dealt with.
No, but I'm talking about,
I don't think it would have to go out to the whole
I mean,
cemetery.
should we send it to everybody, every lot owner in there, so that in the future, if they decide to try to put a bench up, they won't do that?
Well, what usually happens, Darrell, is when a monument company gets a call for something, they'll call and say, is this allowed? Most of the monument companies know that they aren't. In fact, the monument company's never seen this before,
Okay,
you know, having benches. I know Catholic cemeteries absolutely know.
right.
Okay, and I visited other cemeteries like Kingston, Hampstead, Atkinson. I don't see them there. I've only seen one other cemetery that allows them, and that was Seabrook. And they allow the real small ones. I only saw a few of those, though, too. Ones that could be moved by one guy by hand, you know.
John, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we're gonna, when somebody comes in to purchase a lot, are we going to, you know, give them the rules and regulations when they purchase the lot?
That wouldn't be a bad idea, John. It wouldn't be a bad idea. We could always hand them that and say, these are the regulations. But like I say, like Morton Dufresne Atwood, who does most of the monuments there, already knows those rules. And we do have them in writing, and that might not be a bad idea.
Because we had mentioned, they would talk about putting up a sign at the entrance or
Yeah.
in the cemetery about certain rules.
Yeah,
Because it seems like the benches are the biggest offender.
those are the biggest offenders, yep.
And because we haven't decided how we want to proceed with the ones that are there yet.
Yeah. Well, the last selectman board proceeded, they wanted to take those out. We had done that last year. I think it was in the fall.
But we have to at least get everybody who does purchase a lot, you know, to know what they're getting up against, because we are extending the cemetery, and we don't want to go through this again.
Yes, yes, thank you. Yeah.
Jay, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I had a couple. Mark, is this, these benches, do you know how recent these were placed?
I do not know. I've been here 2.5 years now, and they were all there before I got here, so it was, I don't know the exact timeline on that.
Okay, and in an effort to make this easier on the families, is there a area within the grounds that we could potentially move these benches to?
Well, Greg and I had actually talked about that quickly, and when I was visiting a cemetery in Kingston, they actually had a couple of big trees, and they put a couple benches right around those trees. So one of the things in the letter was that people can either put that, because right now, some of them are right in the rows where the mowing goes and the contractor brings the truck or the tractor in, that they could possibly put them right in line with the rest of the monuments would be an alternative. If they have a lot next to the monument they already have, they could buy that lot and put that there. Or choose a place in the cemetery where they might want it. But people like them right next to their graves so they can come in and sit down and, you know, reminisce.
I got another
Yes,
question.
John.
Do you think we should go so far as to limit the height of the trees that they put in, and maybe certain types that we don't want them to put in because of how big they get?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We had to remove a set of shrubs back last year that had overgrown. They were in the way of everything, of other lots, of the guy that had to do the digging. And I said, just pull them out, you know, if you have to.
Some cemeteries do have a list of shrubs that they
Yeah.
can and can't put in, right?
Yes, it's true, John, but cemeteries have also been removing. Linwood and Elmwood and Haverhill removed every shrub in the entire place. Just gone. Because, you know, a lot of them had been putting in 40 years ago, and nobody was paying to trim them, nobody was trimming them, they just decided to get rid of them all. It's not a big problem at Plaistow. It really isn't. There's not a lot. There's a few shrubs that need to either be taken out or trimmed down. Okay.
So there currently is, kind of in response to John's question, section 50-3 under flowers, under F.
Yeah.
And it's very brief, I'll just read it. It says, no shrubs will be allowed to grow or overlap beyond the confines of the individual lot or a group of lots owned by the same family. A lot owner is responsible for maintaining the shrubs so they comply. If they do not comply, the town can remove them following an attempt by the town to contact the owner of record, if one exists.
Yep.
So you do have a law to be able to manage that. Do you
Yep.
feel that's sufficient for you to be able to do that?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, no other issues, what I'd like to do is understand whether or not there is a consensus by our board to allow our section to both send out the letter and to enforce these rules. What say you?
I say, yeah.
Yeah.
Jay?
Yes,
Okay?
that's, we have a sexton for that purpose, correct?
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. It's just nice to have backing, that's all.
Absolutely, we understand. And I really appreciate how well that you wrote the letter. It was very sensitive. It was not a demanding letter. It was just very, very well written.
Yeah,
I really
thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you. It's a sensitive
It
place.
is.
You can
It
bury the person, but you can't bury the passion or the memories of the love. So, yeah, thank you.
Mark, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next agenda item is a decision to sell town-owned property. The two items that we have are 13 Rose Avenue and 17 Canterbury Forest. We have recommendations from the Planning Board and the Conservation Committee that would support us selling the 13 Rose Avenue property. And I would, unless there is other discussion to be made, I would solicit a motion to direct our town manager to sell the 13 Rose Avenue property. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion to
Okay,
direct the town manager to sell 13 Rose Ave.
okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Darrell has a second.
Okay. Mr.
And
Tyan?
first of all, is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing no discussion, would you give us a roll, please?
Mr. Tyan?
Yes.
Mr. Blinn?
Yes.
Mr. Roche?
Yes,
Mr. Coy?
Yes.
And Mr. Britton?
Yes, ma'am.
So because additional information is pending for the 17 Canterbury Forest property, I would solicit a motion to table for further discussion at a later time the disposition of the 17 Canterbury Forest property. Would I have a motion? Would anyone like to make that a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we table the sale of the 17 Canterbury Forest lot, because I think there might be some new information on it.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that?
Second?
Would you please give us a roll, please?
Mr. Tyan?
Yes.
Mr. Blinn?
Yes.
Mr. DeRoche?
yes,
Mr. Coy?
Yes.
Mr. Britton?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0-0, and we will add that to our schedule as this information becomes available so we can discuss it with the entire board. Moving right along, our next agenda item is a New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Certificate of Authorization surrounding Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. On March 16th, 2020, the Board of Selectmen granted authority for the Plaistow Town Manager, Mark A. Pearson, to sign grant agreements with the State of New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services for the potable water project. We have a motion to allow us to enter a grant agreement, and so I would like to see if any of you would like to make the motion that we have in front of you. Does everybody have it in front of them? Would anyone like to make that motion? Did you find it? It's in your handout.
I'll make it.
Okay,
Make a motion to enter into the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund grant agreement with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services to fund the drinking water improvement project. The town of Plaistow further authorizes Mark A. Pearson, town manager, or Greg Colby, assistant town manager, to execute all documents which may be necessary to effectuate this grant agreement, and Mark A. Pearson, and town manager, or Greg Colby, assistant town manager, are authorized to sign the disbursement request with a date beginning August 4th, 2020, and continuing through the project. Seconded by?
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So Bill will second that. And can we have a roll, please?
Mr. Tyan?
Yes?
Mr. Glenn?
I'm sorry, wait,
I have
hold on.
discussion.
We have some discussion first. I'm sorry. I kind of jumped the gun. Go right ahead, Jay.
I was just hoping for the public's benefit, maybe Mr. Pearson or Mr. Colby could talk about the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund a little bit.
So you talk about the grant agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, so as everyone may know, or in case somebody doesn't know, and they're hearing this for the first time, the town of Plaistow has received preliminary approval for an amount, $10,112,202 to bring potable water to the town of Plaistow and to build a East Road pump station, to put water lines in the roadways where necessary, to build a water tank on Sweet Hill Road, to make connections to MTBE affected properties, and that construction is ongoing now. So there's been at least $5.8 million of a grant to do the work so far that is in process. So what is before the board tonight is something that the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services forwarded to us on April 20th from Erin Holmes, and I believe it's in your package. And it is to pass this motion here retrospectively back to August 4th, 2020, which is what the New Hampshire DES needs for the current grant and the disbursements ongoing. It is a similar motion that was made last year on March 16th. So for some reason, the New Hampshire DES did not notify us that they needed this. So tonight, this motion, which was suggested by New Hampshire DES, would bring us into compliance with the grant paperwork for auditing purposes. Nothing would change. We're going to continue to do the work. We're going to continue to receive the grant funds, the reimbursements, and to move forward from this point. So this appears to be an in-house housekeeping item by the New Hampshire DES, and they needed this to be brought before the governing body, the Board of Selectmen, who are the water commissioners, to authorize us to continue to effectuate the grant agreement and to execute documents and to sign disbursement requests. And it retrospectively goes back to some of those activities that have happened since October 4th, 2020.
Thank you, Mark. Jay, do you have any other questions?
No, that was it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions for Mark? Okay, so I guess we can do a roll call now, please.
Mr. Tyan?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes?
Mr. DeRoche?
Yes.
Mr. Coy?
Yes.
Mr. Britton?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a 5-0-0. And we'll move on with that. All right, in your handout, there is a copy of a Board of Selectmen guidelines and procedures. It's also inside of your handbook. In section 2 is a line stating that the board shall by majority elect from its membership following primary liaison. So those are the committees that we assign to each people. As this has been done by consensus for at least the last 3 years, and when I asked recently, I guess it's been occurring much, much longer than that, this has always been done by consensus. So what I'd like to just make sure that our policy is correctly how we're trying to accomplish this. And I would entertain a motion to change this to the board shall by consensus select from its membership or appoint designees as appropriate to the following liaisons. So that's really the only two words that we're changing in this. And could I, first of all, entertain a motion to make that word change?
You'll make the motion to
Okay.
make the change.
I'll
Do I have a
second it.
second? Okay. And we'll open that up first for discussion. Anybody wish to ask a question or discussion? Yes.
I mean, I don't know if this has become a big deal or whatever, but it was always just discussed
Right.
at the beginning, as far back as I can remember.
And that's how long?
Yeah, well, since mid-'80s.
Yeah.
It was discussed, it was sort of an agreement.
Yeah.
There was no dictating of, okay, I'm taking this one, you're taking this one. It was, everything was put on the table.
Yep.
And we discussed it,
Yep.
okay?
So you're happy with that? Are you happy with
I
that?
am.
Okay.
I think it was sort of, this year it was a little different. I think it was sort of already laid out. This is what I'm going to take, and this is what you're going to take. I would have rather had it by consensus, but I'm not going to, I think from this point going forward, maybe
Yep.
we'll do it by consensus.
Okay. Anybody else? John or Bill?
No, I'm good.
Jay, are you okay with this, or you have any concerns?
I'm good.
questions? Okay. So can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Talion?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. DeRoche?
Yes.
Mr. Coy?
Yes.
Mr. Britton?
Yes.
Awesome. We got another piece of thing done. I'm surprised that we're going through the agenda as quickly as we are, since there's so many items on the agenda. So our next agenda item is to approve the use of the contingency fund. And the contingency fund is intended for out-of-the-ordinary expenses, not necessarily, a dollar amount, but it's basically, it's not something that we would typically expect to have to occur. So I will give Greg Kobe the floor, and Greg, could you present those two items and the rationale to be able to use them for the contingency fund? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I can. Good evening. So recently, the town had some significant repair work done to both a fire truck and a police cruiser. The fire truck, as you can see, both unanticipated. The fire truck had significant repairs needed to the tune of $5,350.98. The 2013 police cruiser, a Ford Taurus, with only 58,000 miles on it, recently had a blown engine that needed to be replaced. So there is maintenance and repair line items within each budget, but obviously not to this significance, and that's why we're requesting it to come from the contingency. The normal cost of maintenance and repairs, is covered, but, two items like this that are total about $10,000 is very difficult in the budget and would, tie the hands, of both departments, for the rest of the year. So, given that, that's why we're, bringing it before you tonight to approve those repairs out of the contingency fund. Again, there was $80,000 approved at town meeting. The board had previously approved $2,250 and change for the old invoice going back to 2014 based on the audit of the state of New Hampshire highway work. So there is plenty of money, if you will, in the contingency, and there would be, still $67,750 left to take us through the end of the year. So,
Okay.
any questions?
Well, before we put a questions, I would solicit the motion. Would someone like to read the motion so we can put it on the floor, second it, and then we can discuss it? Anybody?
Why don't you read it, Greg?
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the expenditure of $10,000.98 from the contingency fund for the significant unanticipated repairs to the 2003 KME fire truck and the 2013 Ford Taurus Cruiser. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Darrell will second it. And now we can put it on the floor for discussion. Anybody have a question for Greg? Yes, Darrell.
Okay, a couple of things, Greg, and maybe you won't be able to answer this, but any reason why this engine blew that we know of? That, you know, I mean, engines just usually don't blow up. I mean, maybe Mark has a better answer on that one, too.
Yes, which one are you asking about, the fire truck or the police car?
The police cruiser.
With the program.
Yes, so what was unusual about this was, it was the timing chain that malfunctioned, and the components surrounding the timing chain that just caused the internal damage to the valves and the pistons inside the car. It basically was unanticipated because, as you know, with all of our regular pleasure vehicles, there's usually an expectation that you get to a certain mileage before you have to replace the timing chain. So this was really beyond the pale because the vehicle's only got 58,000 miles on it, and that's not something we normally see into well over 100,000 miles.
Okay. And then just a follow-up question to that.
And did you want to ask a follow-up on the fire engine?
No,
Okay.
on both of them, actually.
Okay.
The contingency funds there, what did we have for regular, I can't remember off the top of my head, so you're going to have to sort of play along with me here. What did we have for regular maintenance of the vehicles that would, is it insufficient to cover things like this, or?
And I'm going by memory a little bit, but there's $19,000 in one department and $20,000 in the other department. So given the fleet of vehicles, these two repairs would be approximate, 25% or more than 25% of the
Okay.
budget on just one vehicle.
Okay.
And how many cruises would that be, Greg, that maintenance budget has to cover?
10.
10.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Jay, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So we'll move the motion. Beth, could I have a roll call?
Mr. Talion?
Yes.
Mr. Blinn?
Yes?
Mr. DeRoche?
Yes.
Mr. Coy?
Yes.
Mr. Britton?
Yes.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay. So our next agenda item is a review draft of the new street light policy that was provided to us by the Energy Committee. Has everyone had the opportunity to be able to read that? It primarily has to do with the maintenance of these street lights and being able to have enough surplus that we can go off and have these lights as they unexpectedly go, be replaced with the inventory that we would currently have. So first of all, I'd like to solicit a motion to approve the new streetlight policy recommended by the Energy Committee. Do I have that motion?
Make that motion.
Okay, so Bill will make the motion. Do I hear a second?
I second the motion?
Okay, John seconds the motion. So first of all, is there any discussion that you have or anything, questions that you may have had about this?
Yeah.
Yes,
I apologize. I haven't read this yet, so
okay.
I can't, I'd have to abstain until I did read it.
Yep. Jay, since you were, I believe you're the representative of the Energy Committee, is that correct?
I am.
Good.
That is correct.
Awesome. Could you relate any discussion or any high points or key points that you think that are pertinent to this motion for us on this policy?
So this was developed prior to me being the full-time liaison to that committee, but this is just a policy to recommend for us to move forward if there is replacement of these LED fixtures. And it kind of lays out the committees you would work with, and the form by which you would request these changes. So there's it's just more of a process for the replacement of the lights if needed.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Any additional discussion or questions about this?
Like I said, I'll abstain until I read it.
Okay. Okay. Shall we move the motion? Could you please give us a roll?
Mr. Talion?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. DeRoche?
Yes.
Mr. Coy?
Yes.
Mr. Burton?
Abstain.
Okay, so that it would be 5-0-1. I'm sorry, 4-0-1. Okay. So our next agenda item is a review or update of Old Home Day bylaws. I communicated with Haley Bush, and she sent me the old set of bylaws. And one of the things I noticed, one of the reasons they wanted to change the bylaws was to determine who was going to control the vendor fees, and that's not even in the bylaws. So I think the committee came to the conclusion that they did not need to change the bylaws, so that kind of negates this next topic item. But I think this would be a worthwhile to discuss very briefly some of the issues that we have found out, and I have communicated from questions I've asked Greg Kobe to the chair and to the committee. One of them has to do with, the initial thought was they could use vendor fees to pay for the expenses of Old Home Day. And it is to my understanding, that would be illegal. That the funds that would be collected are not donations, and thus could not be deposited into the Old Home Day Trust Fund, which limits to donations and advertising revenue. And so those two things can go into that trust fund, and they can stay in the trust fund until they have an expense they can pay for. Did I get that correct, Greg? Greg Kobe?
Greg is not here.
Okay.
He stayed on and asked to be excused, and we did not anticipate that we would need him again tonight. So unfortunately, he's already left.
Okay, so that was my communication. When I talked with Greg this last month, I guess this was Monday morning, around 10 o'clock or so. So he basically made it very clear that vendor fees are not donations, and thus would, if they were to be collected, they would go into the general fund or the unassigned fund balance, and would not be able to be appropriated until next year, until we would either have a warrant article to be able to request those funds. So that kind of takes that out of the question. When I communicated that to Haley, she also communicated that they had decided to ask for donations, and she sent a copy of a letter that they're planning to send out to the commercial firms within the town. And so if they were to collect all of the money from donations, I'm guessing that they would be able to directly deposit those into the Old Home Fund, the Old Home Day Trust Fund, and be able to cover the expenses of Old Home Day. One additional question came up: could these funds, or could the vendor fees be taken over by the Recreation Commission, and how would that work? So since John gave me the question, the idea, and I'm not sure if Mark is the right person to answer to this. Probably it is Greg, but can you at least explain how you thought that might work?
If we have, and I'm looking
I know.
at Bill, we're really trying to get the money for the fireworks. The rest of it, we got covered. So I come up with something that maybe that if the rec commission donated the 6,000 for the fireworks, it would fall under recreation for the town. And then, when we ironed out the rest of the money, we could put it back into the trust fund, and then when we put it on a warrant article, it would come back to you.
Yep,
Would that work?
with the recreation, when they take donations, it goes through Friends of Rec, which is a subcommittee from recreation. They have the 501(c)(3) to take donations. So we'd have to talk to them, see if they'd be willing to do that. You know, I'm sure they'd, you know, we could definitely talk about it. And then it would just be working through them.
Yeah.
It would come in and they would just probably have to, someone would have to come here and have the town accept a donation back from them. We've done it before. We can definitely talk with them, right? But it would have, it's Friends of Recreation is where that would have to come to. That's the,
But these would not be donations, these would be fees for
the
something of
vendors' fees.
value.
the vendor fees.
Yeah,
I don't think you can because it's a 501(c) and those gotta be donations. You know, because it's supposed to be, you know, nonprofit. So that, I don't know where that would go, you know, we get.
Well, if we took the vendor fees and then put it in the general fund,
yeah.
and then put it on a warrant article
Right.
next March, and then you could get it back.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't know if that's something you can do.
I got just a comment on this,
Yes.
okay? We want to get the fireworks, okay, this year. That's the thing. I think it'd almost be easier as a non-public entity to go around, solicit businesses and things like that, get the money, go to the firework vendor directly and say, here's the money for the fireworks. I think if you do that and you leave the town out of it, you're not going to get any backlash of, well, we voted for this to be gone, okay? Okay, it's gone, but we came up with the money through private donations to the, and once the donation is complete, then you pick up the phone and call the fireworks company and say, we have $6,000 or $5,000, whatever it is, come and do our fireworks.
Right.
You know?
But
And
I guess the
and think-
question would be, who would anybody making a donation for the fireworks, who would they make their check out to?
You know something? It doesn't matter. I mean, they could make it out to anybody that, you know, your friends of the rec or whatever it is, okay? Anything that doesn't have a direct affiliation to the budget of the town of Plaistow.
So one of the other things that I discussed with Greg was the fact that this is a town-sponsored event. So I think you'd be running into trouble if you tried to solicit donations to go to another source. It really has to go back to the town, but we already have a trust fund for that. So we can put the money in the trust fund and pay the expenses, and that would be fine.
Well,
So if there was purely donations, if this was purely donations, we already have the mechanism to be able to do that. Put it in the trust fund and then pay the vendor.
And that's what somebody would be doing, right, if you're making a donation for the fireworks.
Right, and if, for a fact, if the donations are not high enough to be able to pay the expenses and that we make a decision not to do it, that money can stay in the trust fund until next year, which is another important thing, because if money goes into the unassigned fund balance, next year it's gone. Okay, it's gone, it's not part of the budget. It would have to be appropriated, yes.
That's a slippery slope, okay?
Well,
You're dancing with the devil there,
I'm
okay?
basically following the guidance that I was given by our finance director.
Okay, I still think you're dancing with the devil, because you can put it into that fund, okay?
Yeah.
But keep in mind, and, I like the fireworks and Old Home Day as much as anybody else. This town specifically voted to take everything to do essentially with Old Home Day out of Old Home Day, okay? So you're dancing around it, okay? And like I said, that's why I don't know. I know that there's enough people in town that will donate money for fireworks. You've just got to find a way to execute it without going through the town. Because otherwise, the first thing, if I was a town person and I didn't vote to have this thing, then I'd be jumping up and down screaming and saying, hey, listen, you circumvented me. You found a way in a loophole to beat me. And that's not the way town government should run.
So be very clear that the town voted for a $10 million budget or a $9
Again,
million
you're dancing
budget.
semantics.
No, it's not semantics.
Yeah.
They didn't vote for
The
the
lines.
Old Home Day line item. They voted for a total dollar amount.
But part of that dollar amount was taking that out.
But it doesn't matter. I mean, it happens all the time. It's just a budget. It's a budget, and we give it to the town manager, and he works with that budget and takes money from one department to another department to make sure that the highest priorities of the town are fulfilled.
Now,
That happens
I mean,
all the time.
it's America. You guys vote the way you want.
Okay.
I'm telling you right now, to me, that's dancing with the devil, all right?
Okay. No, I appreciate your input for it, but basically, we are required to do whatever we're going to do legally. And I think we need to follow the guidance given to us by our finance director. And if we want to have him clarify that, I will meet with him and ask him to send out a memo to the board to clarify that as much as possible. So if you have additional questions, please just send them to me and we'll get them all answered. And then we basically but I think there is a process that we could run this. There is a process that we could run this, and we could do it legally and correctly. Some people may not agree with it, some people don't want it, but
I don't know anybody that doesn't want it.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a case of dollars and cents.
Yeah.
If you take $10,000 or $6,000 out of somebody else's budget to pull off the fireworks, okay, then that person's budget that's starving at the end of the year is going to be crying, saying, we had fireworks, but we can't afford to put heat in this
But
building.
we're not doing that. We're not taking money out of the budget to pay for fireworks. We're asking for donations from the town to pay for fireworks.
Right. And then-
Which is a completely different thing.
Okay, and if you're short in the donations, do you give the donations back to people?
If you are short of donations and they get deposited into the trust fund, they can be then used the following year.
No, I didn't ask that. If people said, I didn't get my fireworks this year, can I have my money back? Can they get their money back?
That you have to discuss with the committee and the letter that they're going to send out. I can send you a copy of the letter, and you can basically recommend that they do that.
Okay.
I think that needs to be
anything's possible.
clear.
Go ahead, Jay.
I think that needs to be clear in the letter that, we're asking for donations for fireworks. But if enough is not raised, then those monies will be kept in the trust fund to go towards a future Old Home Day. So I think it needs to be clear that if the amount is not raised, that's what will happen to the funds. Unless the committee decides to refund the donation, but I'm not sure that's more of a headache probably.
I think any business donating, we could give them the choice, but we still haven't answered the question of the vendors who want to come and sell their wares, who are they gonna make their check out to?
So the last contact that I got from Haley, she simply said that the Plaistow Historic Society was going to handle the vendor fees. I don't know if that was her decision or whether that was a decision of the committee. I
Well,
was
that's-
asking questions, and that's what she responded back
That's
to
the
me.
way it always was.
So I guess it'd be business as usual then.
Right,
the vendor fee.
yeah. Because it doesn't really help her to be able to run Old Home Day this year. The vendor fees does not help her at all. Possibly next year, it might, if we can change the warrant article,
Yeah.
change the wording of the trust fund.
Yeah, and if for some
That's only
reason,
after the
and if for some reason you can't do fireworks, she's only really looking at a budget of around 1,000, right?
You're right. Yeah.
Which that's easily doable, I would think.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. And they seem to think that to come up with 6,000 is a doable.
I think it is, if you start on one end, start somewhere on 125, right at the town line, take it right there, then come up Main Street. I think you'll be surprised at how much
I think
she
you're
could
right.
come up with.
And I think
Plus, you
that,
might have private donations from citizens, too.
right. But they better hop on it quick because time is running out.
Sure, I'm sure there's a drop dead date when they have to tell the fireworks yea and nay.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So, may I ask our representative to the Old Home Day, do you believe that they would know one way or the other whether they're going to run Old Home Day by our next meeting, which I believe is May 10th? Is that enough time? That's
When's our next meeting? July?
May 10th.
Put it this way, it's possible, we gotta get together and make a firm commitment.
Yeah.
And it won't take long to find out, once you go in from one end to the other,
Yep.
how it's gonna play out. So I guess my answer would be, it's doable and maybe we should shoot for that.
Okay.
And either do it or put it to rest till next year. 'Cause we have-
So would it be reasonable to ask you to come back with either a decision or a date when they can make the decision?
Yep,
And that will give us an idea of whether we're doing this or not.
yes.
Okay,
And I
I
think we,
appreciate that, John.
we have to do that.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just
Yep.
like the trash, just keep going.
Yep. Yes, Mark?
Relevant to this discussion, I just want to be clear that the board's intent is not to spend any tax dollars towards either the Old Home Day or the fireworks. Because, so is that the board's clear intent at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
That is the clear intent.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, and I'm glad this is being recorded, that if Old Home Day Committee submits any invoices for anything, I am not going to be paying that from the budget, because as you know, the budget was reduced to $1, and there is no funds, and I do not intend on moving around funds from other departments for Old Home Day. I just want to be clear.
Yep.
Correct.
Thank you.
And Mark, just so you'll know that we intend, if we can't pay for it with donations, it's not gonna happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One more thing.
Yes.
John, if they can't do the fireworks, would they cancel Old Home Day, or would they still just go through with just the day without the fireworks?
That's the question we would have to, make that quick decision. But the vendors who wanna come, they wanna come. They don't care if the fireworks go on or not. They wanna come, they wanna sell their stuff, and so it could go on without the fireworks.
Yeah, I think it should go on without the fireworks, because I think the town needs something like that. To get everybody out and about, and you're really talking, without the fireworks, you're talking $1,000.
Right.
I mean, by
That should
then-
easily
yeah.
be able to happen.
By the middle of August, people are going to be getting close to school. They'll be glad to be home and see some stuff and.
But I think we should, that should happen in the town, at least, even if we don't have the fireworks, we don't have the fireworks.
Right.
But I think the town needs a celebration of some sort after this last year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be good. So, yes, it can go on, and the vendors, they don't care about the fireworks. They just want to be out
No,
there.
they're out of town by the time the fireworks go off.
A lot of them are, yes.
So one final question, and I know Mark's got his hand up, but let me just kind of introduce what I think he's going to say. We do not have in our budget, our normal department budget, enough money to be able to have our employees work overtime on Saturday for Old Home Day. In the past, we have. And so in the past, we have allocated enough money to take care of all the expenses, and the budget, the normal department budgets, covered the use of town employees to allow Old Home Day to occur. So we basically just said we're not going to expend money from the budget to run Old Home Day.
Right.
And if we need resources, we need town employees to make this happen, or we need some other alternative, that has not been addressed.
Some of it actually has.
Okay.
Meaning, we figured out what it's gonna cost for the porta potties, and we thought if they open a pavilion, they could also use some of the toilets over there. But even if they didn't,
And there's already 2 porta potties out there.
so we got that covered. We got an allotment of like 500 to pay for the cleanup from the Boy Scouts. And we were told that the details would be donated by the town. So we pretty much got that covered.
Mark, is there anything that I'm missing?
Selectman Blinn is correct that with the outside detail fund, the board has the use of the outside details for town functions. So any police related to that day could be paid out of the, and normally would be paid out of the outside detail fund, which would not affect the budget. But let me just tell you that there appears to be a health officer need for the vendors, and if you know she cannot incur those expenses for the inspections of the vendor cards. That's just one area. Maybe you can figure out a solution to that. I'd have to talk to the health officer to see if she's available during the day, during the week. That was just something quick that came to mind. You know, in the past, there's been the highway department personnel for setting up, you know, some barricades and parking and different things, and there's also been some groundskeeping duties. So those are the duties that won't happen this year. So I'm not going to try to throw a roadblock in front of it. I'm just, you know, I have a daunting task here, is to manage the budget in the spirit of, you know, what was passed by the voters, and this would go against what the voters actually supported, because they did not support the Old Home Day.
Okay. Thank you. If there's no other discussion, we're going to move on to our next item. So our next item is our town manager's report. Mark, do you want to summarize what you have here? You know,
Sure.
We kept you for quite a long time tonight.
The solar panel, phase 1 and 2, the vendor is not agreeing to the terms of the contract that's been reviewed by Primex and our legal counsel. If they do not sign the terms that were recommended by our insurance carrier and our town council, I expect that we will segue to a new RFP for solar panels at the salt shed.
Is there a need, Mark, is there a need to do that? We already have a second bidder. Could we go to the second bidder?
I'd have to check. I don't
Okay.
recall both processes, so I don't know the answer to that.
Okay,
I'll get back to the board, whatever I do, though.
okay, thank you.
So I met about the sale of town-owned land. The board actually did exactly what I expected, which was to table the discussion on selling 7 Canterbury Forest, and obviously I'm going to move forward with contacting St. Jean's Auction to set up a auction for the 13 Rose Ave property. And the only thing I would ask you to consider between now and then is what you expect the minimum bid to be. You don't have to give me an answer tonight, but you know, what your expectations are. We could do that at the next meeting, and then we'll pass that on to St. Jean's so that you can anticipate a certain amount of minimum revenue to the town for the sale of that property. Town manager's goals, that was brought up, so I created a separate document that I forwarded to the board, and that was about short-term and long-term goals from June of 2020. I won't go into that because that's a separate document. If you have questions, you know, on that, I guess now I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any on that other document that I sent you.
Mark, we schedule it for the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. I've been working with the new leadership of the Budget Committee for the fall of 2021 to work on the 2022 proposed budget, and they have invited and offered to include town management and staff and department heads in the process. So I'm very encouraged that the town officials, staff, and department heads have been invited. And I'm also encouraged that the new leadership is having dialogue with myself, and that we will keep on working with them to get them information, anything that they need. We are setting up notebooks for the Budget Committee members right now, and we would like to go back to what we used to do 3 years ago, which was to offer some town staff to come in to speak to the Budget Committee and answer their questions about the budget, and explain some processes that perhaps new members are not aware of, to give them the information so that they can hit the ground running in the fall. And also in the notebook, we would put together information in there such as revenues, but the revenues would be from 2020, because we don't have revenues for 2021 yet, because we're only in April. But we would use that as just a segue for people to understand about the revenues coming in and what areas they come in, and you know, just work with the Budget Committee as they're getting ready for the budget season. So I've had 2 meetings and several phone calls, so that's headed in the right direction. As you know, the board either attended or knows about the training we held at the Public Works Garage last Monday night. There were 25 persons present and 2 remotely, and the next training next month will be on municipal budgeting. The building inspector came in tonight and explained how he wants to go out and start inspecting businesses and also rental property for building safety code violations. I've met with him today. I met with him Friday. You know, I don't think I really have to.
Excuse me, Mark, he did not do that. We only talked about the proclamation.
Well, he talked in general about what the building department does and how he's working with the fire department, and they're setting up and coordinating to go out to do annual inspections of businesses.
Yeah, so I had that detailed discussion with him. And when I asked him about coming to the board, he was focused on just the proclamation. So as far as I understand, he was still putting things together before he would be ready to present that to us. But I understand the concept, and I understand what he was discussing, but it hasn't been communicated, because I thought he was still in the process of putting that together.
Okay, well, let me follow up with him. I know that the intent of having a building safety department is to obviously not just issue permits, but to also inspect businesses along with the fire inspector, and that's usual and customary. But it's not so much he's asking for permission as it is to just do what's usual and customary to inspect for safety reasons. So I will clarify that with him though and get back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
The paving of Stephen Savage Way next to the public safety complex was completed last Friday. That's also the new entrance, if you will, or another entrance to go into the cemetery. There's a stub of a road that has been, you know, cut in so that when we talk in future meetings about the expansion of the current Elm Street Cemetery, there is a new access point off of Stephen Savage Way, which, if you've been to the Elm Street Cemetery, the only other way in is through that narrow opening across from the Town Hall Annex. So this provides more access and so forth. So the road is complete except for some backfilling around the edges of the roadway. And that's a project that we've worked on and tried to bring it to completion, which we're nearly there.
Matt,
Also,
can I ask a question about that? Is that now considered a town road all the way to all the way to the Palmer property?
no, because that would have to formally come before the board, that amount of footage to be added to the inventory, but we will do that through a separate motion to the board in a subsequent. But I can tell you this, the roadway was built to the town standards, and the Palmers elected to put the water pipe in during the construction at their expense and extend it to the property, the beginning of the Palmer property, so that they could avoid coming back to the board in the town to ask for permission to rip up the newly paved road, because we weren't going to do that. So there is no need at this point that I know of for somebody to say, oh, by the way, we need to tear up the road. Good?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, paving of Red Oak Drive was the result of the encumbrance of money from the 2020 highway block grant, and that was also completed on Friday. And I have come to a successful partnership on the Wentworth Ave reconstruction. Unitel has agreed to contribute $60,000. DeFelice, as part of the water project, has agreed to, in the state of New Hampshire, Department of Environmental Services, through the amount of money within the water contract, has agreed to contribute $40,000, and the overall cost is $150,000, and so the remainder would come from the town, $50,000, and we would use a combination of the block grant money from 2021 and 22, $25,000 each. We would binder coat the road this year, and then it would go through a frost cycle and would be observed, and then next year we would do the final paving. And this would make sure that all of the disturbance out there on Wentworth Ave, which was quite extensive with drainage, water, and now the natural gas would be going in, and the inherent collapses of drainage out there and the patchwork and everything gets reground and reprocessed, and we have a stable road base, and that road, once complete, would last an extensive amount of time. The problem with the original plan would have the water project essentially patch and trench patch and pave one side of the road, and then Unitel would do the other side of the road, but it would not be a total reconstruction. There'd be some deficit areas under the pavement, and we would be revisiting this. So this was the best solution to do, to just realize that this road is a major cut-through for traffic, and that by regrinding and reconstructing that whole road for very minimal cost to the town, with the contributions from the Unitel and the water project, there's no sense doing the trench patches and so forth, because it's going to fall apart in a few years. So this would prevent the falling apart.
Excellent.
So that was negotiations that's been going on for at least 6 months to get to this point. Any questions so far? Okay, Town Water Department, I've directed Steve Dufilly to give me an inventory of all of the broken or failed water valves, gates, and hydrants, so we can create an RFP this year, and to have every gate valve shut off and hydrant working 100% when the disinfection and flushing occurs. And there are funds available in the 2021 water budget. I'm anticipating to cover this work. When we go out for an RFP, we'll go out for an RFP for proposals. I'll bring that back to the board. The board will be part of that process. But this is essential to get all of the components we currently have working and fixed, so that there's no delays in the spring when they encounter a frozen valve, a stuck valve, or something that needs some trench work and so forth. So I will bring that to the board as soon as we have the inventory and we put together the RFP. East Road Pump House bid results. On Thursday, we received a favorable results that the state will be the one to award the bid because this is their funds, so they're going to award the bid. The lowest proposer or bid was Hawk at $1,243,617. The engineer's opinion cost was $1.5 million. And that doesn't mean that we get to keep the difference, the delta of $250,000. This just means that in the spirit of the grant funds that we receive, that perhaps there's something else that will go up. This is something that is a little bit lower, so it will balance out in the project, but we don't get to keep the difference. And of course, the state will decide if they award this. And related to that, they're going to try to time the actual awarding of the bid once they have the permit in hand for the construction, the permits for the construction of the East Road Pump House. So that should happen next month in May. And the last thing I have is that I'm looking to work with the Board of Selectmen on a future agenda for the water operators contract. And I talked to the chairman, and I believe, Mr. Chairman, we scheduled a possible June agenda date for that.
Yep.
For the rest of the board and yourself to work on that. Time is not of the essence in that we have to do something right in June, but I think that you should at least look at the results of the process and be thinking about the award of that contract so that the operator can get ready for the anticipated start date, whatever that should be. I anticipate the start date will be actually next spring, because we would like to coordinate with whoever you choose as a water operator to be the contractor to perform the disinfection and the flushing of the system, because that only makes sense, because they then would be actually getting paid by the state to do that work. And they would be exercising nearly every gate and every hydrant and every shutoff in town. So it just makes sense that that's coordinated with the same vendor, whoever you decide.
So we have a June 7th, 21st, and 28th meeting. So I think we could bring up the topic on the 7th and come up with input to you on the 21st. Would that be sufficient?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Beth, can you add that to the future agenda for the 7th of June? Awesome. Mark, is there any other things you want to add?
Yes, just in your folder, I just wanted we included in your folder 2 emails. It was from the library, and it was from 2 different people at the library that evidently were part of the training that the Plaistow Police Department put on for active shooter. And, the comments that they felt the need to send back to us to thank the police department. I thought that the board should at least receive the feedback and read the feedback, and it's very, very complimentary, and it was much appreciated by the library. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that.
Thank you. Jay, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions for Mark. I know in the last town manager's report, you were talking about some work that was being done on the hallway at the town hall. And I'd asked, how much that was going to cost. Is that work completed, and do we have a total on the cost of those changes or the work that was done?
Yes, and I apologize if I indicated I would get that to you. I will put that on my list of things to do with Beth, and then I'll forward it to all the board members what the invoices and the total cost of that work was.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, I know some time ago I'd asked about putting together an organizational chart as well as some other job descriptions, stuff like that. Is that still in process at the moment?
I can check on it tomorrow. I do have a thumb drive that I was prepared to send out or give to every member that included the information. I'd have to check to see if we had any last documents that needed to be included. I think it's substantially complete, and I can check on that tomorrow. And I can tell you that what I'll do is I'll send out what we have right now And then I'll let you know if there's anything else that we need to add in the near future. But substantially, it's complete, and each selectman would get a thumb drive with the organizational chart and all of the job descriptions that we have at this time. So yes, that will go out tomorrow.
Thank you. Appreciate the work.
Thank you, Mark. We will be going into non-public, but before we do, is there any other items? I know we talked a lot about the things that we have been doing, but are there any other issues or points that you would like to make about the committees that you have worked with this coming?
Yep, I got a few things.
Bill?
Just Saturday, I was at Plaistow Pride Day, so I want to thank all the volunteers, recreation, and highway for running around town and picking everything up. There had to be well over 100 bags out there. Wow. It was quite a bit. I know when I drove up like Westville and Pollard, you could really see the difference. So now let's hope we maintain it. That's the big thing. And this Saturday, May 1st, will be opening day for baseball and softball. And at the same time, out at Park, the Lions will be there conducting a food drive as well. So come on down, opening day, everyone's invited. This will be the first, I won't be able to make it this year. This will probably be the first opening day I've missed since we started having them. And the one other thing that will open up on Saturday, summer recreation. That'll begin on June 28th and runs through August 13th, but registration opens up this Saturday. And they're also still looking for counselors if there's anybody out there that wants to apply.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. John?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Daryl?
Fine, thank you.
Jay?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so we will close this meeting. Well, first of all, we'll be closing it at 8:23, but we would need a motion to enter non-public session under reputation. And I believe that is section C.
C.
So I would entertain a motion for us to enter non-public session. Could somebody make that? So move. Okay, so we will enter non-public session under RSA 91A:3(2)C reputation. So we will close the meeting, and Jay, you'll be sticking around. We'll be getting that link to you. I think it's already sent? Yes. Okay, okay. All right, so why don't we take about 2 minutes, and then we'll